What's going on, guys? I'm Tim Kelly. He is Anthony SanFilippo. This is Phillies Stoplight.
Brought to you by our good friends at Wapner Newman, Philadelphia's personal injury attorneys.
We're already off to a good start. I remembered to say the title at the beginning of the show this time, so that's an improvement from this morning. But day one of the winter meetings, mostly in the book. There was not a major signing either from the Phillies or anyone else. Pretty quiet day on the transactions front.
Michael Soroka?
Yeah, Michael Soroka is not moving the needle for me. But 2 more days to go after this, 2 full days to go after this. The biggest development to come out of the day, Anthony, was Dave Dombrowski spoke. He spoke with Rob Thompson and Preston Manningly there with him. And in it, I asked, where do things stand with the bench coach? And he said there's, quote, mutual interest between the Phillies and Don Manningly in that position. Nothing's finalized, but it certainly seems to be at this point that it is trending towards Don Manningly being the next bench coach for the Phillies.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that way. And you came out, like, normally in a press conference, like you throw like a softball first, right?
Yeah.
Not you, Tim. Tim goes right for the jugular. What's going on with the bench coach? I think is exactly how you phrased it. And,
where do things stand?
Where do things stand? Either way. And Dave Dombrowski was more than happy to oblige that it was Don Mattingly that they are interested in hiring, and it sounds like Mattingly's interested in coming in. I guess there's some things that need to be worked on with the contract and how that all will work. The more interesting thing that I thought about it, obviously, how we'll talk about the fit, but it was kind of interesting to hear about, because you also followed up asking what the relationship is going to be like. Obviously, his son is the general manager. Now, it's almost like reverse nepotism here, right? In a lot of ways, which is rare, but that's okay. And Dave did a good job kind of saying, hey, listen, we wanted to make sure that everybody is comfortable. So is Rob comfortable with Don Mattingly being there? Obviously, they work together on Joe Torre's staff with the Yankees, so there's a comfort level in working together. Is Don comfortable with his son being the GM and, the upstairs people knowing certain things that they don't share with downstairs,
and
vice versa?
Yeah.
Like, I think that's kind of, got to be handled that way. And is Preston comfortable with the arrangement? And Preston joked. He said that now all the dinners, the father and son dinners, he can get them expense on the Phillies. But yeah, no, I think that was kind of an interesting thing, and it was an important thing as well. So it seems like that's something that's going to come to fruition here in the very near term.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a timeline put on it, but it wouldn't shock me if tomorrow or the day after something is decided there, because Rob Thompson will speak to today it was just with local media. Tomorrow he'll speak to whoever shows up in this ballroom a few doors or rows down from us tomorrow. So I'm sure he'll get asked about that, and perhaps he'll have a resolution then, if not in the near future. But it certainly seems to be that is the way things are trending, and obviously very accomplished. He's been a manager on top of his playing career. Been a manager of the Dodgers and the Marlins, was with the Blue Jays this past season as their bench coach when they reached the World Series. So I think it was one of those things that almost made too much sense when Don Mattingly and the Blue Jays parted ways. His contract was up, seemingly good terms. I think the only question was whether those two, Preston and Don, would be comfortable working together, and in this case, it appears that they will be. And I don't think reverse nepotism is, I guess it's a thing, but in this case, I feel pretty comfortable saying Don Mattingly is not getting this job if he gets this job because of his son. I think his resume
speaks for itself.
Yeah, and anyone that's going to question his resume probably doesn't know what they're talking about.
I mean, there's a lot of people who thought that he would get named to or elected to the Hall of Fame by the Modern Day Committee yesterday. Instead, they brought in Jeff Kent. We were there for that press conference as well today. But, Donnie Baseball, for all the things that he did well in his career, both as a player and even as a manager, he was a pretty good manager too. The one thing he's never done is win a championship. Yeah. And the closest he came was this year.
2 outs away.
Yeah, with the Toronto Blue Jays. So that's certainly something that I think is still driving him, right? At 64 years old is what I think he is. And I think that's something that he still would like to get to before he decides to retire. And how cool would it be for him to finally accomplish that with his son?
That would be an
right?
incredible story.
So it's a great story. So I think you could look at it from that perspective as well, as to why it makes a lot of sense for him to try and do it here. Now, I guess to ask you, how do you see the fit with Rob Thompson? Because one of the questions that was asked, Ty Daubert from Phillies Nation asked about Rob Thompson's contract extension, and there was no news on that today. Now, it sounded like at the end of the season press conference that Dave Dombrowski was interested in bringing him back for another year. No news on that today, and no news seemingly scheduled for that in the coming days either, although I guess there could be a surprise. Do you look at Don Mattingly and go, hey, if things don't start off so well and the Phillies decide to make a change and they have a lame duck manager, if they do or they don't, even if he has 1 year left, if they sign him, is he the guy that's like, okay, now just hand the reins over there?
I think you open yourself up to that storyline if you don't complete the extension. And this is the exact quote from Dave Dombrowski to Ty's question. He said, well, you would know that when we make an announcement, so we're not at that spot, but that doesn't change the thought process there. The thought process being that they would like to add a year onto his contract. Dave Dombrowski in the past has said he doesn't like having managers operate as lame ducks. The last one he had operate as lame duck was Joe Girardi, and see how that went. He inherited Joe Girardi at this point. I mean, I guess technically inherited Rob Thompson as a bench coach, but he clearly is on the same page with Rob Thompson. I think it will get done, but I'm not entirely sure what the holdup would be because, like I said, they had a deal done at the end of season press conference last year. This is not Lane Kiffin. This is not a situation where you have to come up with some huge complex contract because there's buyouts or anything like that exists in college football. Seems pretty cut and dry to me, like a 1 year extension added on, and that's that. I know it's more complicated than that, but it doesn't seem like something that would be a months-long venture. So I'll use Dave Dombrowski's words. When that announcement is made, I think people will stop speculating about why hasn't the announcement been made to this point. I don't think they're bringing Don Mattingly in with the thought that he's going to replace Rob Thompson. I really don't. But
but one thing I will say is this, and you're probably right that that's not what their mentality is. But we have to wonder. They made a point of telling us at that end of season press conference that they were going to make that change at bench coach, and that they wanted a bench coach with managerial experience.
Yeah.
So there has to be kind of a thought process behind wanting that.
Well, I just think it's helping the manager. Not that at this point Rob Thompson's very experienced, but having that second set of eyes that is coached, that has had to make these decisions in real time. I think that's valuable, and I do think there's just a reality that they needed to shake something up just to kind of appease the public. But you have a coaching staff where Dusty Wathan's been here since 2017 or 2018. Caleb Cotham's been here now since 2021, I believe. You have a ton of guys that have been here for a long time, a super long time as far as a major league staff goes. Rob Thompson's been here since 2018 in different roles, but a long time. So I think it helps sometimes to bring out an outside voice, even though the outside voice in this case happens to have a connection to the GM. I think if Don Mattingly had become available and Preston Mattingly wasn't the Phillies GM, he'd still probably be the best candidate for this job. And yes, if it gets to a point where in June Rob Thompson hasn't gotten that extension, the Phillies get off to a super slow start, then he does become that obvious candidate. Whether he would want to do that or not, I don't know. But I think the bigger picture right now is just the bench coach role, because I think it rounds out a staff that, say what you will, if you had executives rank the major league staffs, if you had Don Mattingly onto a staff with Kevin Long and Caleb Cotham, the Phillies would probably rank in the top 5 if I had to guess.
Yeah. I know that we want to move on to the next topic here, and it's funny that we're sitting here at baseball's winter meetings in 2025 knowing what the Phillies are facing with free agency. We've written 4 stories between you and me today. This is our second Phillies Stoplight of the day. And you would think the big story on any one of these spots would be, where do things stand with Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto?
Well, Lord willing, at one of these spots it will be. It's just not today.
Not today.
There really wasn't a ton. I mean, Anthony said we wrote a bunch of stories, did a bunch of stuff. There wasn't some breaking news regarding JT Realmuto and Kyle Schwarber, but Dave Dombrowski did say a few things. He said, quote, "We continue to have that interest and there's optimism, but the reality is at this point, I just really don't know." And it wasn't an aloof, I'm not doing my job, I don't know, or pessimism. It's just when guys become free agents, they're away from you. They get to speak to other teams the same amount that they want with you, and you can't make any guarantees. Matt Gelb followed up and said, essentially, do you need clarity at some point? And Dave said, yes, that's been expressed, but he added later, I'm not saying that we're sprinting forward with a lot of different things, but that's been properly communicated, and I think we're prepared to shift if we need to. And I think they are, but
Yeah.
it's certainly not what they want to do.
No, not at all. And I think what the most important thing there is that's been communicated. In other words, what he means by that is they've told both Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto and their agents that, hey, listen, we have some other things that we want to try and get done. We have a certain time that has to cut off. It's down the road. It's not like it's tomorrow or anything like that. But they are aware. So Schwarber's camp and Realmuto's camp are definitely aware of what the Phillies' timeline is on these things. And so therefore, having communicated that, I think that's good faith negotiating, right, in that regard. And I think that probably helps kind of set the timeline for absolutely everything to take place. The Phillies are probably giving Realmuto and Schwarber the time that they need to talk to other teams, and vice versa. Those guys are going to give the Phillies probably an answer before the Phillies need it to be known, right?
Before Christmas, we'll have a good
idea. I think so. It was funny. There was a report. I want to say it was Jeff Passan, but I've read so many reports from so many different people.
It was Jeff Passan.
Yeah.
That he'd be surprised if there wasn't a resolution on Schwarber by the end of the winter meetings. That was on November 30th. Now, though, you see Ken Rosenthal, I believe Matt Gelb also reported that, within the next 2 weeks is kind of what you're looking at. And, of course, tomorrow and Wednesday are within the next 2 weeks, technically, so it could be then. But maybe it's a little longer. The thing is, this is not going to be Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, a prolonged. Even JT Realmuto the first time, I believe it was late January when he re-signed with the Phillies. So it's not going to be a situation like that where it drags on deep into the offseason. You're going to know one way or another early on. And really, I was watching a clip from Joel Sherman on MLB Network today. It's not just the Phillies, it's the rest of the baseball world is kind of waiting, particularly in the case of Schwarber, because he seems to be coveted by a lot of teams, and it's not as much as you don't usually think of a 33-year-old DH as being that type of guy. If you've watched Kyle Schwarber and you know kind of what he's meant from a clubhouse perspective, it's not surprising, but it does seem like that is the shoe to drop. And it will be interesting if that doesn't drop in this winter meetings. Does this whole week end up kind of being a dud?
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting, Tim, because I think when we were looking, and not just you and me, but the entirety of the baseball world was looking at free agency at the end of the 2025 season, I think everybody just said, well, Kyle Tucker is the number one guy. There was a big thought that Pete Alonso would probably be the number two guy. And yet here we are at the winter meetings, and it seems like even with those guys still out there, that everybody's waiting for Kyle Schwarber before they even think about Tucker and Alonso. And it really comes down to not necessarily Schwarber being a better player. Obviously, Kyle Tucker is the better player of the three. Alonso's younger, right? Does a lot of the same things as Schwarber on the field power-wise, but he's younger, so you would think that would be a more attractive player. It's all the off-the-field stuff. It's running the clubhouse. It's being a leader and being a guy who everybody just gravitates to and wants to rally behind to win. I think that plays into the decision-making of all of these teams so much more than anything else. Yes, he's a great power hitter as well. We know that 56 home runs it doesn't happen every day. So I think that's obviously part of it. But I think that the stuff that you can't really measure statistically is what separates him from the field and makes him the number one free agent this offseason.
Yeah, it's a really weird dynamic with Kyle Tucker because I think he's the best free agent, but he seems to be the backup choice for a lot of these teams. If the Yankees don't re-sign Bellinger, if the Phillies don't re-sign Schwarber, in past years we knew when Ohtani or Juan Soto or even Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, we knew at the beginning of the offseason, yeah, there might be some surprises. It was surprising the Padres ended up signing Manny Machado. But in most of these cases, you have a pretty good idea entering the offseason. Aaron Judge was the same way. Who are the one or two teams that are going to be hell-bent on signing this guy? You really don't have that with Kyle Tucker because the Cubs are a bizarre franchise in the way they run things and seemingly aren't even going to make an attempt to retain a 29-year-old outfielder. It doesn't make much sense to me. But then beyond that, you have teams like the Phillies and the Cubs or the Phillies and the Yankees, the Dodgers, go down the list, that they all like Kyle Tucker, but he is someone that are you going to be the team to give Kyle Tucker 9 years? I don't know. Teams were jumping up and down to give Ohtani or Harper or Aaron Judge that amount of years. Kyle Tucker is below them in terms of player, but he's a younger player. I am a little surprised at how things seem to have developed with him, but it does, circling back, speak to how teams feel about Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, and now Real Muto is the other one that we didn't hear much about today at all. There was some questions of Dave about prepping for other catchers as a plan B, as a fallback option. And, he basically said, we prepare every position. We study every position. We know every player that that we like and have all our reports on everybody, which is true. I mean, they do for everybody every year. And I followed up by asking, I said, well, yes, but in certain seasons, is there more emphasis put on that? And he agreed. He said, yeah, of course. We have our list of first basemen, but we're obviously not looking for a first base because of Bryce Harper. We have our list of shortstops, but we obviously aren't.
End of the discussion.
Yeah.
Bryce Harper is not moving back to the outfield. Can we please stop having this discussion?
Yeah, Dave,
and Trey Turner's not either.
Yeah.
Although he didn't say never with Trey Turner.
Right.
He
said not yet.
Yes, not at this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion with catcher's been a position they haven't had to have much of a list for the past few years, at least not in terms of a starting catcher. And all of a sudden, that's one you have to have, and it makes you appreciate having had JT Realmuto at his peak. That you didn't have to worry about that because most teams every offseason are in a position where it's like you'd like to upgrade that position, but there's not a good option available. And I think the Phillies are kind of getting to that position this offseason where they need a starting catcher, and none of the options, including JT Realmuto, are particularly appetizing.
No, but I'll tell you what I think that, and this is just more of opinion than anything else, where I think that they really need to start looking at is even if they've re-signed Realmuto, who's next?
Yeah.
Because that's what's missing. In the last 4 years, they've traded their two best catching prospects, Logan O'Hoppe, who went to the Angels in the Brandon Marsh trade, and then, of course, Eduardo Taique, who went to the Twins last year as part of the Joan Duran trade. So now they're kind of bereft of catching depth in the organization, which is why Realmuto matters to re-sign him first and foremost, but more so than that, even if you sign him 2-3 years, whatever it ends up being, you should be starting to develop that next guy, and they don't have it. So I think that that's something the Phillies really need to start thinking about as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if one of the deals that they do make, if you're trading somebody off of your major league roster, maybe brings you back a minor league catcher. You thought it was a possibility, or you wrote about it potentially being a possibility with the Mariners as far as the Matt Strahm deal. Turns out that the Mariners then chose to go get Jose Ferrer from the Washington Nationals for Harry Ford.
Now, to be clear, on the Harry Ford, I think if the Phillies had acquired him, that's your starting catcher. I don't think you were re-signing JT Realmuto and then putting Harry Ford, who's seemingly major league ready and was blocked by Cal Raleigh, on the bench. I think that would have been your guy. It didn't end up being that. It was a weird trade. We've seen Ferrer pitch quite a bit against the Phillies. It's never been somebody that I'd be like, I'm going to trade a 22-year-old catcher for. Even obviously they have Cal Raleigh, who's the best catcher in baseball.
Yeah.
They didn't need him, but I thought that was a weird trade. I'd sooner hold on to him and have him be my backup catcher than make that type of trade. But
I agree.
Nonetheless, if the Phillies do end up re-signing Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto, there's going to be this perspective that they're quote-unquote running it back. And Todd Zielecki of MLB.com asked Dave Dombrowski about this today and prefaced it by saying, I don't really like saying running it back. And Dave Dombrowski said that he doesn't particularly like that phrasing either. where do you kind of fall on it? Because I get what Dave is saying. He went on to say Crawford's going to be up. That's not running it back. Kemp could have a larger role. Max Kepler is not going to be back, which Max Kepler's become like the punching bag this offseason for him, for people saying, well, we're not running it back completely. Max Kepler won't be here. That's been made clear multiple times. Aiden Miller could be a factor next year. But where do you fall on it? Because I get what he's saying, and it would be almost no matter what they do, I think it's going to be less running it back than it was last year or even the year before. But it still is a lot of the same team that if you bring back Real Muto and Schwarber.
Yeah, so the way I wrote about this for OnPattison, it's out there now. The thing of it is I think it's how you define the term running it back, right? So in Dave Dombrowski's world and his definition of running it back, even re-signing Schwarber and Real Muto, he's looking at his team and he's like, hey, we're going to change 10 guys on the opening day roster from what we had a year ago. That's not running it back. That's 10 different players. And technically, he's right.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from what's a fan's perspective of running it back, and a fan's perspective of running it back is it's the same primary players that you're going to war with, right? So of the 16, if we're saying 10 guys are different, of the other 16, the majority of those 16 are your everyday players in your lineup and your rotation and in the bullpen. So that's where I think that there's the difference in what that means. The one thing I thought was kind of interesting, and Dave was a little, even though he gave us a lot of information today, there were some things that were a little bit contradictory. And one of the things that I thought was an interesting question, and Matt Gelb from The Athletic asked the question, and he asked about Gabriel Rincones. And Dombrowski, you could see on his face that like this was a name that he was interested in talking about, but kind of it was really good information to ask the question by Matt. And he talked about it and said, there's some people who believe he can hit major league pitching right now. Only right-handers, can't hit lefties, but he can hit major league pitching right now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. If he's going to be in the major leags, though,
right-handed pitching in the majors.
That's what that's right-handed. He can't hit lefties. If he's going to be in the major leagues and be part of your lineup, well, then where's Brandon Marsh?
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone's kind of assuming that how that outfield puzzle gets put together is going to be interesting. So maybe Rincones is another guy. So maybe you're going Crawford and Rincones in the outfield. Obviously, Rincones would have to be part of a platoon. But if he's out there and he's left-handed, you're not playing Brandon Marsh as well. So I think then does Brandon Marsh become a tradable candidate? Now, he also talked about Brandon Marsh as being part of a potential platoon in left field with Otto Kemp. You're probably not going 2 platoons in the outfield. I know they did it at the end of the year.
I don't know. They might.
Well, but are you going to – that's taking a lot of risks on young players.
It is, yeah.
You're assuming Crawford plays every day.
Yeah. It certainly wouldn't be running it back, though, if they do.
Well, yeah, you would assume Rincones is on the strong side of a platoon. So it's 2 young players you're saying, here you go.
Yeah,
and it's a lot of lefties.
I liked Rincones in spring training last year. And then we didn't hear a word about him the rest of the year, basically. Yeah. And it's because it's another left-handed hitter. And I talked about this with Dave Dombrowski today, and I said, is there another time where you remember so few right-handed hitters being available? And he joked and he said, yeah, last year. But he talked about when he was the GM of the Expos, and he said, before you were born to me, which I think technically is true.
It is,
yeah.
But you do remember the Expos.
Yes, I do. I was a big Vlad Guerrero fan when I was a kid. Vlad Sr. But he talked about back then it was so hard to find left-handed hitters. There were times where he couldn't find left-handed hitters at all. And right now we're in a period where righties have become less popular. Parents are so insane with, particularly in baseball, with thinking their kids are going to go to the pros, that you have so many kids that they've kind of turned their kids into left-handed hitters because they realize it's more advantageous, and you're kind of seeing that effect now play out at the major leagues. But you end up in a situation where I get it. People have a right to be annoyed that it's been years now where the Phillies are looking for a right-handed hitting outfielder, and to a degree, they found one with Harrison Bader last year, and at moments maybe Nick Castellanos was that, but we have been having the same discussion for years now about finding a right-handed hitting outfielder. But if you actually go through and try to make a list of here's who they should trade for, it's a really small list. And Taylor Ward went for a large return that knocked Joe Adell out of being a potential option, I think. There's just not that many right-handed hitters in the sport right now, and that makes it difficult. It sets you up to potentially have two platoons out of three outfield positions. Now, I don't know that it's necessarily the corners, or maybe does Crawford one day play center and one day play left, and he's kind of part of the three guys for two positions type deal. But yeah, I mean that is where the sport is at right now, and I think people may, especially if Schwarber and Realmuto are back, have to get comfortable with this possibility of in the outfield, you're going to have platoons. You're not going to have bring back Schwarber and Realmuto, and also sign Cody Bellinger and Aaron Judge to play left and right field. It's not going to work like that, most likely.
Yeah. But that was to me, that's the most interesting thing. And the one player, we got to bring this up. Because he went, I don't know if you or I agree with Dave Dombrowski on this, but he was talking about, he said, well, and he does well, I'm not sure that you want to change much from a 96 win team.
And I get what he's saying about that. There's some truth to that.
Yeah, and then he goes on to say, well, Alec Bohm, I think he's going to have a better season next year. He was a 100 RBI guy 2 years ago, and he was hurt last year. And he's a guy that could be batting fourth or fifth in your lineup. And I know that's going to set people off hearing that.
As well it should.
And that's my point. Like, is he saying that because he's trying to make people think that they really believe Alec Bohm's a top-notch player and that, being right-handed, he's valuable outside the organization? Or is he setting us up for, hey, we can't find that right-handed bat. Alec Bohm's better than what's out there. We're going to hold on to Alec Bohm.
I think it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think they are realizing there's so few right-handed hitters, particularly in the outfield, but really anywhere, that you're not Alec Bohm away. Like, there are teams that would like to have Alec Bohm. You're not giving him away for nothing. I do think, like, if you can find a way to add right-handed hitters, because there's so few other right-handed hitters available, maybe Alec Bohm becomes a little bit more of a commodity. Now, some of the names thrown out last offseason when Alec Bohm's name was out there, Mason Miller and George Kirby and whatever the legitimacy was, they're not getting anything like that. Alec Bohm is a flawed player that has 1 year till free agency. But he's still an above a replacement level player that hits right-handed, and there's just so few of those guys, not only in the sport, but in terms of that are gettable. There's not many of those guys out there right now. So I think it's a combination of you're trying to set the stage for, hey, we're willing to listen on Alec Bohm, but also we're not going to give him away. And if no one takes him, we'll be happy to have him back for another season. I think it's kind of a combination, while also saying we have one of these right-handed guys, and if you want to come get him, feel free to call us, but we're not giving him away.
I'm perfectly fine with everything you just said, except bat him fourth or fifth in the lineup.
Well, no, I'm not fine with batting him fourth or fifth in the lineup, but that comes down to the Nick Castellanos contract not panning out. That was the guy you paid to be the fourth or fifth hitter in the lineup, and it didn't work. Now, also at that time, I think you thought Alec Bohm would have a higher ceiling than he's proven to have. I think you thought still, yeah. I know Alec Bohm made an all-star team, started an all-star team. That's not really indicative of what Alec Bohm has been for most of his career. But he does drive in runs. That's valuable hitting sixth, maybe even fifth, not fourth. But I don't know who – if you made me bet right now on who the cleanup hitter is going to be on opening day next year for the Phillies, I think he's the favorite, isn't he?
Alec Bohm?
Yeah. Who's a better option?
Well, there isn't one. I mean, there isn't. I mean, you could technically flip. You could put Schwarber behind Harper.
Yeah, that's stupid.
But why would you take him out of batting in the first inning? That's the thing. So there is no real answer here. There's no real answer.
Well, and Dave Dombrowski said regarding the outfield, I'm paraphrasing, but we have some work to do. they also have some work to do in the fact that we're looking at their lineup today and saying Alec Boehm, who we're not entirely sure is going to be on the team, but he's probably going to be their cleanup hitter on opening day.
Yeah.
So that's where things stand after day one of the MLB Winter Meetings. We will have, I believe, another guest tomorrow. Rob Thompson will talk tomorrow. Bunch of stuff going on. Maybe there'll be a move that'll really give us something to talk about. But no matter what, even if there's not much news, we'll make some news on OnPattison.com, and we'll be back here talking with you guys tomorrow.